I'm Larry Scarpa, architect from Los Angeles and Florida.
Hi, this is Angie Brooks of Brooks Plus Scarpa Architects.
And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild, and it's our Valentine's Day show. And what could be better than being in love? Oh man, your brain is on a euphoric, crazy, often stupid, out-of-your-mind focus on someone or some building that lights you up. You can't stop checking messages. You can't stop Googling. Your heart is racing, and your body is a circus of feel-good chemicals. Dopamine revs you up, and serotonin levels fall, taking your rational old self right into Hallmark card territory and cutting your appetite. Adrenaline and nor-epinephrine kick in, then oxytocin, like a big teddy bear, comes in for the cuddle. Are we talking about people or architecture? Today, it's both, with three couples merging their personal and professional passions into an explosion of design.
Whoa, Tom. Easy boy.
Oh, sorry. Okay, first up, curator Sascha Feldman and architect Jacob Esocoff and interior architects Christine Stucker and James Veal. Later, we'll have jazz with Norwegian couple Heidi Skjerve and Daniel Formo. And now, the guy who lost his heart to architecture one dark and stormy night back in January of 2007, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. 16 years ago, yes, I was minding my own business in my 1978 contemporary house with its shag carpeting, bizarro vertical windows, shifting muddy foundation, and an exterior of the alien-sounding T111, a type of lumber that did not age well, even when it was installed. Both visually and physically, it tended to rot and mildew, and even when you replaced the old with the new, it looked terrible. It was a 70s thing, thankfully long gone. I was at my computer one night when it was actually dark and stormy, thinking of a new house, something more modernist, something like my dad would design. He was an architect, one of those thousands who worked on non-glamorous projects, like Baptist churches and elementary schools and U.S. post offices. He was one of those thousands who worked hard but never got written up in Architectural Record or Progressive Architecture or any of the AIA magazines. My dad came along at the NC State School of Design in the 1950s during the golden age of modernism, and he loved it, but he didn't get many clients who loved it. Baptists, school boards, and the Postmaster General, claiming austere budgets, just weren't that open to something that didn't look like something else from 30 years prior.
No spaceships.
My dad died in 2003, but that night in 2007, it was just me and Google, and I found some amazing modernist houses in the town I grew up in, Raleigh, North Carolina. I had never seen these before, or so I thought. Houses by George Matsumoto, the bard of North Carolina modernism. The Catalano house, sadly destroyed in 2001, which has become U.S. Modernist flagship image on our homepage. Houses by Jim Fitzgibbon, who had passed away by then, and Brian Shawcroft, who had not. A few hours later, I realized, like a bolt out of the blue, that I had been in many of these houses with my dad when I was about 6.
Wow.
And suddenly, a flood of repressed memories came back, and I took notes on the history of the houses, got a few photos, and started talking to Raleigh architect Brian Shawcroft, who was 78 by then and was always willing to have me drive him around Raleigh in my Mini Cooper, photographing houses out the window as long as there were several martinis afterwards.
Huh.
Those notes and photos became a local website, which became ncmodernist.org, now with about 5,000 houses. Plus, we've done about 150 tours of 400 houses all around the state and the country. I truly fell in love with modernism, and it's a love that only grows over time. And every week here and on the websites, it's our great privilege to share this love with all of you. Apparently, this is uncurable. My wife refers to U.S. Modernist as a 16-year seizure. My friend Brian Shawcroft, however, passed away in 2017, but what a way to go. Dying on his hospital bed, he asked for from the doctors and received a martini. You can learn more about Brian at ncmodernist.org/Shawcroft. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
This first interview is a real treat. George will send me the files to edit after he's gone on a trip, and this next interview, in my humble opinion, is one of his best. Sascha Feldman is the director of the James Cohan Gallery in New York City, and architect Jacob Esocoff is co-founder of the design firm Ideas of Order, or IOO. They were featured in the New York Times in 2022 for a dream engagement and wedding at the restored Saarinen 1962 TWA Flight Center at JFK Airport. Here's George's conversation with him on a cold night in New York. They didn't end up where they started.
That noise you hear is Grand Central Station, where we have ended up tonight after tromping around most of New York trying to find a place to do this interview. We had originally planned to go to the very wonderful mid-century Seagram building with the design by Philip Johnson, the great restoration. We were going to sit at the Philip Johnson table and have drinks, but there's a private party there tonight. And there's a private party almost everywhere in New York tonight because it's the holiday season. So we're here at the very fashionable Cipriani in Grand Central Station, sitting down, waiting for our drinks. Sascha and Jacob, welcome.
Thank you.
This is fun. This has been fun so far tonight. Yeah.
Got a little architecture tour.
Absolutely. So before we start talking about the two of you, let's go back in time, Jacob, because I did a little research on your dad. And did he study under Louis Kahn?
The way I hear it is that he was on the list or was planning on being in Kahn's studio.
Yeah.
And over the summer, Kahn passed away.
Oh!
And so he didn't ever get to be in the actual studio, but he and my mother, who were both at Penn at the same time, would often drop in on pinups and reviews. And so did get a little bit of experience with him. But
what a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Did you get told stories about architecture growing up, or did they stick to like the Goldilocks versions?
I definitely hung out in the office.
Yeah.
And thought it was fascinating to see. I love the architecture models. I mean, that by far and away was my favorite part of them being architect, was that they made models. And what they did looked cool, but they definitely would never force me to go into architecture. But if you saw the apartment I grew up in with all of its modernist furniture and art, you know that I really stood no chance. It was meant to be, I think.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to 50 children of architects, and whether they choose the profession or not, it gets into their DNA.
Exactly.
It certainly got into mine.
Right.
And here I am in Grand Central Station doing interviews about architecture.
There you go.
So it's quite delirious. Okay, take us back to 2008. Sascha, how did the two of you meet? It was in college, right?
Yes, and it's perfect that we're at Grand Central because Jacob and I met at Sarah Lawrence College.
Oh, here come the
Bronxville.
drinks. Okay.
My Negroni has arrived.
A Negroni, yes.
So we met at Sarah Lawrence College. It's in Bronxville. It's about 25 minutes outside of the city, and the train that you take is Metro North from Grand Central. And for most of my time at Sarah Lawrence, I lived in Manhattan and commuted north, and so I'd be here every day. So I very much connect this gorgeous building to being at school. And Jake and I met my first year, his last year, so I was a freshman, he was a senior.
You got some kind of special dispensation to sit in on this thing, right?
Yes. So at Sarah Lawrence, most of the classes are tiny seminars where you're around a small table. It's 10 to 15 students plus the teacher. And some of the classes are open to all, and some of them are advanced, meaning, you should really be a junior or senior. It's a big workload, or they expect you to know a certain level of information before being in the class, no matter the subject. And this was a avant-garde literature class, and I was dying to take the course. I had heard about the professor, who's still a part of our lives. And I pushed my way into the class, and once I got in, Jake was sitting across from me at the table, and I thought he was alluring and interesting, and he smiled at me, and he actively listened when I talked, but we really never spoke, which I know is crazy, but it's the truth.
And similarly, I believe at the time, Jake, if my research department is accurate on this, you were thinking, I'm going to marry this woman.
Yeah, I as soon as I saw her, I didn't know if I was going to marry her, but I thought, I'm going to marry someone like her. So I might as well start with this one.
Yeah.
But I also thought, in knowing that, I also knew, if I started dating her now and things got serious, I'm not even graduated from college. I'd like to explore the world a little bit. So I thought, well, if it's meant to be, she'll be around when I'm ready.
That is a wildly mature thing to be thinking at that age, Jacob.
Yeah, I guess so.
He's a planner.
So. Yes.
He's a planner.
Yes.
Okay.
I have faith in the universe.
Okay. So nothing happened. And then somehow you reconnected. How did you reconnect back?
We were part of a larger group of friends that all stayed in touch during school and after. And, in the years after school, Jake was working for his parents for a couple years in D.C. They both have their own architecture firms there. I went to London and went to graduate school, studied art history. So we were kind of in and out of each other's lives. But, with social media these days, you kind of keep tabs on someone and know what they're up to, even if you're not talking to them. And then at a certain point, we were both living back in New York, and our professor from this literature class, really had a bond with many of us who had taken several of her courses. And she'd have dinners where we'd all hang out together downtown. And we have two in particular very
like a
close
salon
mutual
kind
friends.
Of thing?
Yes, but very casual.
Very casual.
We were all kind of people in the arts, and we're reading the same things and going to the same museum shows and wanting to keep a relationship that was kind of tied to being classmates.
Yeah.
And then we had two friends in particular that, in retrospect, we know this now, but we didn't know it at the time, were saying to both of us individually, why don't you date the other one?
Yeah.
But what they never said was the other one is interested in you. And that was very important information.
Yes.
So we came to that conclusion ourselves 7 years later.
7 years later.
Well, eventually I asked this common friend, if I asked Sascha out, do you think she'd say yes? And he he smirked. So I was like, okay, I full rejection isn't in the cards necessarily.
So your chances were at least 50% probably,
yes,
right?
Yes. I clocked them at 50% at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's 7 years later. You graduated from college. You've got some work experience. She's graduated from college. Your strategic plan is starting to come together. Yeah. What happens next?
So I want to come up with a way where I can ask her out, but if she does turn me down, it doesn't get back to any of my friends. And nobody ever actually knows about it. So I come up with this scheme to ask her for a favor. And in return for the favor, I'll take her out for a drink.
I see.
In some way, she couldn't turn me down. I mean, who turns someone down for a favor?
Right. With a dinner attached.
To pay back, for a favor. So one of her artists at the time, Kara Walker, was having an exhibition at the former Domino Sugar Factory. And I asked her if she could get us, me and my parents, tickets, or rather...
a spot in line.
A spot on the list.
It was very well attended.
It had very long lines. And she did just that. And a few weeks later, I was able to take her out for a drink. So I thanked her in an email afterwards and asked to take her out for a drink.
And at that moment, what happened?
At the drinks?
At the drinks, yeah.
So it only took about 15 to 20 minutes for us to realize we both liked each other. And we basically started dating at those drinks.
The only part of the conversation that I remember from that night was that we were talking about chairs, which I think to some people wouldn't be romantic first date territory, but for people who listen to this podcast is probably perfect.
Oh, please, that's the erotica of art
and so
architecture.
It went from chairs, and you said something to me like, so are we dating now? And I said yes, and that was it.
Yeah.
And truly, there's been no wave since then.
It's true.
It's amazing. And I do feel like, it sounds like we really had no contact in those 7 years, but I think we knew a lot about each other, and we knew what was interesting and meaningful to the other one, and we knew that we had a similar education, and, I knew about his background, and we could really talk to each other as peers and as people that have, really strong common areas of interest. So
what year are we at now?
2013.
13, okay. So click, click, 2 years go by. You guys move in together in 2015, right?
Yeah.
And now you're on the runway to engagement.
Correct.
Yeah, a 5-year runway.
Yeah.
It was,
We weren't in a rush.
Yeah. You know, it was at that first date, though, that I realized more, because I knew you were in the art world, knew you knew about a lot about art, and I wanted to a lot about art as well.
Yeah.
And when she started talking about chairs and started talking about architecture, I was like, oh my God. She also knows about architecture and can speak with me in a really interesting way, in a way I'm actually not getting from a lot of the other people I know who are architects. She actually brings a really interesting perspective on architecture through the lens of art and through her own experiences.
Because wasn't architecture kind of on your checklist for a mate?
Because I am the son of 2 architects.
Yeah.
And
you
my
wanted to
grandfather
continue
was
the
also an
dynasty.
architect.
Really?
Yeah, I thought like that's part. Yes, it's part of the destiny.
Yeah.
But the more I dated around, the more I met people who were my age and also architect couples.
Yeah.
The more I thought, maybe it's interesting to find somebody who's architecture adjacent.
Yeah.
Actually, that could be also a very enriching way to a relationship.
As you're dating, as you're living together, what are some of the memorable places that you visited?
We took a great trip to Mexico City and went to the Luis Barragan house and Casa Gilardi. We went to Berlin and went to the Reichstag when Jacob was working for Norman Foster at the time. That was really exciting. We went to Madrid together. We've done Palm Springs Modernism together. We actually went to Palm Springs Modernism last winter instead of a bachelorette party with my cousins and went to the Fry House. And
through all of that, she put up with my commentary on all of those buildings, which was really special.
So you were just like rattling constantly about this as we went along?
We have conversations about it, but I like to point out the smallest details in each of these buildings and talk about why they're so hard to do, so hard to pull off. And she's a saint for being interested in them.
We have one family member in particular that likes to make fun of us for how much we love a house tour.
Oh, yes.
But
well, we're going to have to get you on some of ours because we go all over the place.
Can't wait.
You'll just lose your minds. Now, you've met, I'm writing the movie script here now, so you've met, years have gone by, you've had that first date, you're living together, you're going on trips. What trips to switch for engagement, and how does it happen?
What spurs the engagement?
So yes. About 7 years in, I was thinking, I think now's the time. And I noticed that in about 6 weeks, we were leaving for a trip to Rome, Paris, and then London for a wedding of 2 of our friends. And I thought, well, those are all romantic cities. I should probably pop the question in one of them.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it for a couple more weeks, and I realized the last thing I want to do is be carrying around a ring to each one of those cities. I'm liable to lose it. Anything could happen. And I realized the best thing to do is actually propose before the trips, before we actually leave to get even on the plane.
Yeah.
And that's when I come up with my scheme to propose at TWA Airport on our way out to Rome.
So you're at the Serotonin terminal, the old TWA terminal, which is now the hotel.
Right.
And were you going out on JetBlue or something? How did you get her there?
We were flying out.
We weren't flying JetBlue, but we had an overnight flight to Rome and had already spent time at the TWA terminal, knew that we loved it, and you had cleverly said, since we have an overnight flight, let's go for a 5 o'clock dinner to TWA at the Jean-Georges restaurant there, and then we'll go right to the terminal and get on the plane and go to sleep.
Right.
Which I thought was genius, and I wasn't suspicious,
because
it sounds like something he would do anyway.
That.
So you're having dinner in this beautiful restaurant, I think on the 2nd floor, right, of the terminal, and there's some subterfuge involved.
Yeah, so if I have a plan, I really try to dig into the details. So I couldn't
tell that about you, Jacob.
So I was thinking, well, it's got to be at the right table. It's got to be in the right way. She said, the interesting part is that she said she didn't want to be proposed to in public. I mean, we had already discussed. We'd already bought the ring, so she knew it was going to come someday. And so I took the train out there a couple weeks before and met with the maitre d' and asked to be sat at a specific table. He said, we really don't sit people at this table for dinner. But he said, let me know your name. I'll put you on the list. You'll be at that table. And it'll look like we happen to sit you at that table. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
And then I also said, I also don't want to give her the ring. I'd like the ring to come in some kind of surprising way. So when we drop off our bags with you, there's going to be a present, what looks like a present, in one of the bags. And just open up the bag, and at dessert, bring out that present, and that'll be the proposal. What I decided later on was going to be the present was I bought this book that the hotel was selling about the design of the terminal, about aeroseronin, and I carved out a void in the pages of it and inserted
only an architect calls it a void. Everybody else calls it a hole, but there's a void in the book. Okay.
Well, it doesn't go all the way through, so it's not a hole, it's a void. And I inserted a piece of foam, made a little slit in the foam so the ring would sit inside, and then wrapped all of that in, I used the plotters at work to plot out TWA wrapping paper.
Okay.
And then attached a letter on it with TWA-inspired stationery and wrote out a message to Sascha in the voice of aeroseronin, signed by aeroseronin. So I really dug down to the details for it. But.
Oh, yeah. You're sitting there at dinner. You're getting ready to go international. He's taking you to this nice restaurant. It's dessert time. What happens next from your point of view?
The maitre d' comes over with a wrapped gift and hands it to me. And I know something's up, but it's the shape of a book, so it doesn't feel ring-like. And I open it up, and as he said, it's a book about the history of the terminal. And I open the first page, and there's a gorgeous illustration and a gorgeous ring, and it says, "Will you marry me?" And it was so beautiful and perfect because it felt like a private moment in a very public, open, kind of glorious space.
It wasn't like you're on the Jumbotron at a football game.
Exactly.
Right.
And I could read it and see it and just look him in the eye, and it felt very intimate in a huge space. And even though my life is in art and I'm a gallerist, my big love is books and literature and reading. And so having it come in the form of a book just showed me that he really gets me and really knew it would make me excited and feel really loved and really understood. So I was thrilled. It was perfect.
You found the inscription. When did you find the ring next? Did you flip the pages?
It was impossible not to see because it was right on page 1.
In the void. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It was great. And then from then we went on to Rome, which is obviously an architecture capital of the world, and Paris and London for a wedding. So it was an amazing beginning to a great trip.
Yeah, and great stories to tell all your friends over in Europe, right? You just got engaged.
Exactly.
It was great.
At the TWA terminal. But, folks, it doesn't stop there because there was a marriage. And where did that happen?
At TWA.
Yep.
I think when you marry an architect, I realized unless the site was UNESCO site level, it was hard to get him excited.
Yeah.
And originally, actually, our first choice, the first thing that came to mind of where I wanted to get married was the Breuer building.
Oh, right.
So we know it as the old Whitney or the current Frick. And at the time that we were thinking about getting married, this was 2019 pre-pandemic, and there was a really special restaurant on the ground floor of the Breuer building that did weddings. But then our engagement was December 2019, and COVID was really March 2020.
Yeah.
So we really postponed for about 2 years, which ended up being a silver lining in a lot of ways. But TWA became the clear front runner after the Whitney moved out of that space.
So in the TWA terminal, if you go there, and everybody should, when you come in the front door, there's one of those old-style airport signs with the little flippy things that tell you the destination. And then you walk forward from that, and there's a sunken bar area. So you were in which one of those for your wedding?
We were in the sunken lounge in front of the Solari board.
Okay.
That used to tell you when the planes were arriving and departing, but now they use to do messages, to kind of have different logos. Yeah.
And what kind of service was it? I mean, how do you do a wedding in the sunken bar of the Cernan terminal?
So you can rent out many of the original locations of the building. So you can rent out the entire sunken lounge, so that whole ground level, for an hour. And that's where we did the ceremony. And we had a ceremony officiated by a friend of mine that I've known for 20 years that I've grown up with. And we were mic'd so everyone could hear us. But then from the mezzanine level, anyone who's going through the airport and the terminal and the hotel can watch.
Yeah.
And they did, and we actually had a beautiful audience of people who wanted to watch very quietly and respectfully, and that was really nice. And I could see them as we were getting married. But it was amazing to see, everyone that we love, our friends and family, in such a beautiful space, and the original furniture.
And you had your reception in one of the ballrooms?
Yes, we had a reception in the 1962 ballroom, which was the original baggage claim room.
Oh, right, where the conveyor belts were originally.
Exactly, which is now redone and gorgeous. And we had a cocktail reception in the Ambassador's Lounge, which is where pilots would hang out before flights. So we used all the original...
Drinking before flights, I might add.
So when they
it was a different time.
Correct.
Yeah, that's where they filmed the Tom Hanks movie with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah. In those tubes. Exactly.
I think 2001 Space Odyssey is also filmed there.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's why we asked, who else likes to get married in TWA? They said actually a lot of film buffs like to get married there because it's history in film.
It really is. It really is. And I'll put in a plug for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It doesn't get much thanks for anything these days, but they're actually the group that preserved this building for so long and kept it in mothballs until a developer was able to come along and restore it to its current glory, which is just amazing because it could have been torn down so easily.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God, right? How did the audience that you invited to the wedding like it?
Oh,
I think they loved
it.
Yeah.
I think they had a great time.
I mean, a lot of people, just as soon as they walk in, they know they're in a special place.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like the building speaks for us in a way. I mean, its character is it has a lot of the characteristics of our relationship. It's fun, but also serious. And it's very optimistic about the future. There's a sense of craft to it. There's this feeling that somebody really took their time to draw each one of these curves and make sure that each one connects to the next one. And there's the thoughtfulness to that, which I really appreciate, and I see in Sascha, and I see in our relationship.
Right, because some couples just see each other and fly to Cabo, but you had a much more strategic pathway to this, right? And it's turned out great, and your story got picked up in the New York Times.
Sure did. That was amazing.
How did that happen?
I can't explain it, but I have always wanted a New York Times vows column. And I submitted our story and wrote them 4 saccharine pages about our whole story. But I also really pushed the idea of the building, as Jake was saying, as representative of our relationship, and that we picked it because it represents 3 generations of Jake's family that are architects, and that it represents a gateway to New York in a lot of ways. And in my vows, I said I promised to never suggest that we move out of Manhattan. And being here and loving this city is really important to us.
Yeah.
And it turns out that their arts editor had been dying to cover a TWA wedding in the paper. And it had really just opened to events pre-pandemic. And so kind of we were the first to get it going. And I think knowing that it's an architect and a gallerist getting married at a major architectural icon that is kind of just being re-given to the people of New York was a special idea for them.
Well, it's a wonderful story, Sascha and Jacob. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Christine Stucker and James Veal have been creating interiors together in the New York area for more than a decade. Christine got her start at the University of Kansas.
Go Jayhawks!
Then found success with designers John Varvatos and Betsy Johnson. James studied business at the University of Bournemouth, England,
Go Cherry Bears!
Whatever they are, and worked in construction project management before turning to architecture. Their firm is Brooklyn-based Stuart Schaefer, and they've been featured in Dwell, House Beautiful, Apartment Therapy, Casa, Interior Design, Domino, Brownstoner, and they're all over Instagram. We discovered them and their very cool modernist renovation during our last trip to New Canaan, Connecticut. Welcome, Christine and James.
Hello.
Thank you. What an intro.
So let's go back in time. It's 2009. It's a barbecue. Tell us about that moment.
Oh my gosh. Yes, we met at a barbecue. I came into a Chelsea barbecue and I was with a couple friends of mine and I saw James at a picnic table surrounded by girls and I was like, who is that guy? He should be my boyfriend. And he did not pay any attention to me. We got introduced. He seemed very nonchalant. I found the party to be pretty boring. So I was like, I'm going to go. And I stood up and I said, nice meeting everyone. And to my surprise, James jumped up and he said, I'll come with you. And we walked out of the party together. And I said, so what's your name? He said, James. I said, what's your last name? And he replied with, why do you want to marry me?
Ooh. Oh.
And that is how the relationship started.
Yeah, let me try your last name on for size.
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
And I was very into Chris as soon as I saw her at the barbecue. And I wasn't trying to be aloof. I was just so nervous. I have zero game when it comes to talking to girls, and I didn't know how to approach her. And
that's such BS.
It's true. And as she was leaving, I panicked and kind of shot up, and I was like, I'll come with you, which I was so glad I did.
Well, you really only have to get that conversation with a girl right once.
One time, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And James, we got to side with Christine on this. You have some game, buddy. We can just tell.
Yeah, I know. He's so full of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're full of it.
The name of your design firm,
speaking of names,
isn't your names like most architects. Where did Stuart Schaefer come from, and why the umlaut on the Schaefer part?
So we started off with a very different name. It was actually Bow and Bear a long, long time ago. And, we built this from the ground up, and we started out, and very quickly we were getting approached to do very big jobs, big projects. And we just felt like our name just didn't feel right, didn't feel professional enough. And it just wasn't on brand for who we were becoming. So we wanted a new name, and we were searching, obviously our names didn't work, and we were trying different names. And
you could be a butcher shop otherwise, Stucker and Veal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So in the end, we took my middle name, and
which is
Stuart, and Chris's grandmother's maiden name, which is Schaefer.
Oh.
But what we didn't know was, fast forward 5 years, or however many years it was, we were with Chris's grandmother, and she was like, what a really smart name. And we were like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, well, Schaefer is German for, to shepherd.
Yes.
And Stuart originally comes from the word to steward. So both words mean to guide, which is quite fitting for our career. But we didn't know it. We can't say that's the reason, but in the end, that was quite fitting.
But it's funny how things happen for a reason.
Right. So yeah, that's how the name became.
And how long have you had that name?
13
years,
12 years. We changed it pretty quickly after we started.
11 years.
Yeah, we maybe had the original name for maybe a year.
Yeah.
And then we quickly realized
we grew out of it really fast.
Yeah, it wasn't right.
Well, I got to say, you really have some very well-produced photography. I love the black and white photo of the two of you walking down the middle of a busy urban street, holding hands. Christine in a white dress and James in a jacket and jeans. And James has this expression like, I am a badass. While Christine has a disapproving look like, honey, you need to dial this back a bit. Who staged that?
First of all, you have very, very good insight to this relationship.
Yeah, I
that
feel
we have.
like that. You just hit the nail on the head.
Speaking to a therapist here. A good friend of ours is an amazing photographer. Her name's Candy Kennedy, and she pretty much curated that entire shoot. She made us do super awkward, uncomfortable things that we would never do, but since we were friends with her, we kind of let her push us around.
Yeah, I think we needed content for something, and we just spent, like half a day with her, and she was snapping a few things.
Yeah, that was 100% her curation.
Yeah.
Well, it's a really great photo because it just says a zillion words in one image.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and it's pretty spot on. I don't think I'm a badass, but
yes,
Chris definitely does like to
I keep you grounded.
Keep me in my place.
Yes, I do.
Well, I have to say
that
the two of you have, and I'm sure you've been told this, more than a passing resemblance to Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson.
That's a 50 Shades of Grey?
Well, you know Jamie from...
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I haven't heard that before. But I have met Jamie before in the past. But yeah, possibly. I can see that a little bit.
We hear Jamie Lancaster.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Jamie looks like a lot of people, I think.
Somebody thought I looked like
Tom York.
I
don't see it, but,
okay.
It's still a compliment because he's cool. The most talented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In airports, I get Tim Robbins all the time, particularly if I'm wearing sunglasses. People will come up and ask for an autograph or to say hello.
Nice.
So that's kind of
so
fun.
Funny.
Yeah. Christine, when you were at the University of Kansas, I understand you didn't like the curriculum. What was missing, and what did you do about it?
Oh, I didn't dislike it. I had a major of fine art and art history, and I did not really see how any of that was going to translate to the real world unless I was a super successful artist or a teacher. So I just felt like there was really nothing to kind of teach you how to hustle and get an actual job once you graduated. So I suggested to my professors that I take a year off and that I go to Europe and I make my own curriculum. And I have no idea why, but they all agreed. And so I lived in Greece, I lived in France, I was in Turkey for a minute, I went to Hungary. And meanwhile, this is before, I'm really dating myself, but this is like before cell phones with video and all that garbage. So I had to email them pictures of what I was completing every week. And we had phone calls and I spent the year just kind of traveling and meeting different artists and sculptors and working alongside them. And yeah, it was an amazing way to kind of experience like the real world and be educated at the same time.
Yeah, it sounds great.
You gave yourself a traveling fellowship.
Yeah.
I know.
I did. And I have, to this day, my siblings, are younger and they're like, how the heck did you manage that? And I think I was a good salesman, like early
Or they just wanted to get rid of you. They're like, we got to get this girl out of here.
I mean, I got great grades, but some of the work I produced while I was away, it was the best that I've done to date. So I feel like people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone a little bit. And that was like my first dabble in it.
Now, James, you were in business school in England. How did you shift to architecture?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've always been business-minded. And originally when we started our business, it was structured in a way where I would be handling the business side and Christine would be handling the creative. And that's how we began. But as we kind of developed as a couple and in our business and in the way we create, the lines got blurred and we kind of complemented each other in many different ways. And
you have a natural talent as well. Like
thank you. That's nice.
You do. And I think you just needed
He's
to
a
learn
badass.
that.
That's what's going on here.
I know.
Yeah.
I can't pay him too many compliments, though.
But I just, essentially as the lines got blurred, I just taught myself and did a lot of long late nights teaching myself how to do everything
online classes.
And taking a lot of classes. And also, I guess the best way is just learning in the field as well and, honing your skills. And I feel like it gives me definitely a unique perspective as well, or both of us coming from different backgrounds. I think it's a positive.
Now, the two of you have lived in New York, and you recently bought a house in Easton, Connecticut, a modernist house, which you have been renovating. I've seen photos of it online. It's a really great house. What kind of condition was it in when you guys got it?
When we got it, it had been owned by a couple that lived in Manhattan, and they came on the weekends occasionally. So it very much it needed some love. There was turkeys living on the roof, coyotes on the ground floor. We had a cabin that was just roach and mouse motel. It needed extensive landscaping, but the property and the bones of this home are just unbelievable. Like, you can tell the people that originally built this, they put a lot of love into it. I'm assuming it was their dream home when they had it built. And we just came in and tried to kind of pay homage to probably its original glory and clean up the things that were obviously incorrect and needed to be kind of updated.
What was the biggest challenge other than the animals in the house?
There really hasn't been a biggest challenge. I mean, it's definitely been a labor of love for us. I don't think we realized having that long of a driveway that, paying for things that aren't very fun to pay for, like repaving the driveway or removing trees that are about to hit our deck or things like that. Buying a generator because there was no generator. Those were the kind of things that probably were the most complicated. We have to replace a lot of the windows. So, we're chipping away at that because it's a big ticket item. But this house, there's expiration dates to certain parts of it. So you kind of have to maintain them. We have a 30-year-old refrigerator that is the price of a used car. But we keep it going. We keep getting it maintained. We keep having guys come. I swear once a week we have the refrigerator repair guy here.
Do you see a finish line in all of this? How far are you along?
I don't think we'll ever. I think this is our forever house. And I think, we want to add a pool. We want to do more landscaping. I think we'll always find stuff, little things here and there to do. Nothing that we're doing is going to take away from what was originally done. Like, we would never put that much of our stamp on it. We've just made adjustments, to things that definitely were dated. Like the kitchen, we pretty much totally cleaned that up and remodeled that, but still kept the original cabinets. We still kept the original, like, hand-rolled stainless steel counters.
Nice.
They wouldn't be our first choice, but the detail and the labor that went into these things, like, we can't rip that out. I have too much appreciation for the craftsmanship to get rid of it.
And that shed that was full of mice and roaches, you've turned into what's been described as a Scandinavian dream cabin.
It's definitely an oasis. It is amazing to go in there. It's very different from our house, you are literally in the middle of the woods. So it is a very relaxing place to spend time in.
Great energy.
Is it a guest house now or a little office, or how do you use it?
For both. Typically, originally it was for an office. It was COVID times and, work from home, very remote. So originally it was an office. Their family would stay and put a bed in there. And, now it's kind of more guest than office.
We have a lot of friends come up from the city.
Yeah, that stay there.
Yeah. Marlo and I, my son and I, we stay there sometimes just for the heck of it. It's
where we go on vacation.
You go to your guest cabin.
Makes it easy.
Nobody's home.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're in such a marvelous area between there and New Canaan and Stamford, full of iconic modernist houses.
Yes. New Canaan is just breathtaking. There's so many beautiful properties there. It's crazy.
Well, we come up there every year for the Philip Johnson Glasshouse Summer Party. So maybe we'll see you next year.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about how the pickles are made. You guys work as consultants, designers, architects, coaches to people for both residential and commercial projects, particularly with businesses who have a brand. So how do you translate a brand into a room?
We can't tell you that.
Yeah, I know. That's the secret sauce. as people, as designers, as creatives, guides, whatever you want to call it, I think James and I are both like really purists. We get asked all the time, what's your core style and what's your genre? I think we're very fluid in many of them, and we love and appreciate all of them for different reasons. So when we get commercial jobs or even different residential jobs, we spend so much time getting to know the client, whether it's a clothing brand, a watch company. Right now we have like 2 therapists have bought a home. We dive so deep into the identity of these people or this brand, and we really try to think about, who's going to be in this space and how they're going to receive it. And that's really how we come up with the ideas and how we try to become appealing to their clientele.
Obviously, there's a lot more input that goes into a brand than into a residential project, but we have taken that discipline over to residential. So I feel on the residential side, we get into a lot of detail. I mean, clients think
we come from a different angle than your typical firm.
Clients think we're crazy. We're like, finding out how they cook, how they move in a kitchen, and what they like to do and how they do it and where do they spend most of their time. And we just have a gazillion questions. And that really kind of sets the parameters for which we work within. And for a brand, there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, it's a totally, totally different game. I mean, retail, you have to think about how people move through the space and necessary lighting and things like that. And I feel like we started this business because I could see working in-house with these other brands that there was a big gap in the market and nobody was really specializing in retail design at that time that made sense for some of these companies.
The website is stewartschaefer.com. That's STEWART-SCHAFER.com. Happy Valentine's Day, guys.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Continuing our theme of couples in love this Valentine's week, we head over to Norway, I think the most beautiful country on earth. Heidi Skjerve is a Norwegian jazz, contemporary, and folk vocalist and songwriter who, among many clients, has composed and arranged music for the Norwegian Air Force and the Norwegian University of Science and Technology Jazz Ensemble.
I did not know Air Force's commissioned compositions. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, even the United States has a jazz band, Tom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Her husband, Daniel Formo, is a musician, composer, and founder of the Trondheim-based Particular Recordings Collective. And 1 year ago this week, Heidi and Daniel released an album of classic love songs called I'm Glad There's You. Welcome, Heidi and Daniel. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get started, I have this mental picture of Trondheim as one of the loveliest cities in the world, but most people in the U.S. have never heard of it, and I've only gotten as far as Bergen. So tell us about your town.
Yeah, well, it's a city in the middle of Norway, which is quite far north, but still just in the middle of Norway. It's a university city, so it has a lot of students and young people, and therefore also a lot of cultural things going on. The university has a lovely, great jazz department, which is also adding to the great jazz community here. So there's lots of things going on, and also nice nature all around.
And also weather-wise, a lot of things going on. It changes from 1 minute to the other.
Yeah, you can have 4 or more seasons in a day.
Wow. So because it's Valentine's Day, we need to know how you guys met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was through the university and playing together for some years.
Yeah.
And
it was actually playing together on Christmas Day, I think.
Yeah, yeah. That was the first time. Yeah, and you lived close by.
Yeah,
actually.
we did.
And so were you friends first, or was it love at first sight?
We were friends for a while first, and and then suddenly something happened.
That special moment.
Yeah.
That got swept away by the music. Do you have a favorite song as a couple?
Yeah, actually, I think that moment was when we, after having played together one night, and then afterwards you always you don't want to go home after playing, and then went to this place and danced, and then just something happened. And so, I guess the song that we dance to, that's
a Norwegian pop song.
Yeah, that's a Norwegian pop song. But otherwise, I think Come Rain or Come Shine is very special.
Yeah, we had friends singing it in our wedding.
Oh, nice.
I didn't dare sing it myself because I would cry. Now we've spent 17 years together, so now I dare sing it.
Daniel, I want to ask you about the Hammond organ. It's been around since 1934, but its heyday really began in the mid-50s when Hammond introduced their B3 model. It's the most distinctive organ sound in pop music, on everything from A Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum to Gimme Some Lovin' by Steve Winwood and Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs. The thing about the B3 is that it has a helper called the Leslie speaker, kind of a spinning speaker horn, and changing that spin rate makes these cool vibrato effects. They stopped making the B3 in 1974, but there's a new B3, which is its actual name, that came out in 2002 that uses digital technology to recreate the classic sound. Daniel, tell us about your experience with the Hammond B3.
Yes, I play the Hammond organ, and it was actually a bit of a coincidence, actually, that I started playing it, because I was studying the piano, and then in my cohort, my year, there were no bassists that year. Oh. And then I went to a performance with a great organ player, and I just thought that, that's it, I got to have that. And so I think it was the next day or the next week, I just went and bought one. And I just fell in love with the sound, I think. It's so physical, the sound of people always comment when I drag this beast around with my own car and trailer.
They are huge.
They are big.
They go back to the days of analog electronics.
Oh, yeah. Mechanical, motorized instruments.
Wait a second,
so much.
I'm getting a roar.
Yeah, sorry, it's our neighbor cutting the grass. Should I tell them to quit? No. They can probably just quit for some
I
some
wondered
minutes.
if maybe you were firing up the organ there.
Yeah. This next song was written by Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer for the Broadway musical St. Louis Woman, which had a 4-month run in 1946. Only the song endured, and it got picked up by musicians such as Judy Garland on her 1961 Carnegie Hall album, Ray Charles, Oscar Peterson, Frank Sinatra twice, the second time with Gloria Estefan, Bette Midler, and even Willie Nelson. Here's Heidi and Daniel with Come Rain or Come Shine.
I'm gonna love you like nobody's loved you. Come rain or come shine. High as the mountain or deep as the river. Come rain or come shine. I guess when you met me, it was just one of those things. But don't ever bet me, 'cause I'm gonna be true if you let me. You're gonna love me like nobody's loved me. Come rain or come shine. Happy together, unhappy together, oh won't that be fine? Days may be cloudy or sunny, we're in or we're out of the Monday, but shine. High as the mountain or deep as the river, come rain or come shine. I guess when you met me, it was just one of those things. But don't ever bet me, 'cause I'm gonna be true. If you let me, you're gonna love me like nobody's loved me. Come rain or come shine, happy together, unhappy together, oh won't that be fine? Days may be cloudy or sunny, we're in or we're out of the Monday, but I'm with you always, I'm with you rain or shine, shine. Gotta love you rain or shine.
So that's your song.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
From the town with 4 seasons in a single day.
Yeah.
Come rain or come shine.
I think I'm crying now, Tom.
Oh, George.
Hey, your latest album from a year ago, I'm Glad There's You, is described as classic love songs to keep spirits up during the pandemic. What is it about these songs that's so uplifting?
Well, it's not just uplifting. There's some really sad songs too. It's songs that I've experienced through my whole lifetime. I would say it's experiences from loving and from being around people in love.
Love and loss, yeah. Now, Daniel, you have a one-man show that you developed called the Orchestra of Speech. What is all that about?
Oh, yeah, that's kind of a research project I did. I was always interested in the musicality of language, or speech, rather. We kind of have this ability to discern different emotions, not only emotions, but intentions and everything based on the rhythm and the tonality and maybe the musical aspects of speech. So I did a project where all the music that I make is based on speech recordings from different conversation genres, like, for instance, pillow talk or baby talk, or different typical genres where you use your voice in special musical ways.
Do you find that there's a difference between languages? Say the rhythms are different, say, for Norwegian than English?
Yeah, to a certain extent, there are these differences. But what has surprised me while working on this project is that the similarities are more striking than the differences, actually.
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, when a mother speaks to her child, it's very similar in any language. So there's some kind of basic musical language that we all know and feel, I think.
Now, Heidi, you are an experienced jazz vocal teacher, so I want to ask your advice. What can amateurs like me, who sing I've Got You Under My Skin in the Shower, do to improve our performance? I mean, is it diction? Is it breathing? What do I do?
Or is it the shampoo?
Yeah.
You just have to copy Sinatra, I think, on this particular song. Or copy any singer that you really like. That's what I've done. I've copied and copied and copied. And after copying a lot of masters, your own voice will rise through this. That's what I've been taught from my teachers in Trondheim.
So every song is like a lesson.
Yeah.
And I think that's also the same way you learn language as a child, right? You just listen to your parents and copy how they speak, and then that's a very natural way of learning a language. And jazz, in a way, is a language.
Now, Heidi, tell us about this next song from I'm Glad There's You called Social Call.
Yeah, here I've listened a lot to Betty Carter, of course. The great Betty Carter. I love her recording. So you can probably hear that I'm influenced by that. And put it together with a nice ringtone from Nokia that you probably heard. So it's kind of a silly song, actually. But I really like this song. And this project was happening during the pandemic, and people were sitting at home. No one was playing concerts anymore. So I got this idea to call all the musicians that I've been wanting to work more with, that I've been working a little with years ago, and now they suddenly were available. So we made a social call to all those old friends and musicians, telling them to come over to the studio and make a recording of this nice tune.
Happened to pass your doorway, gave you a buzz, that's all. Lately I thought lots about you, so I thought I'd pay a social call. Do you recall the old days? We used to have a ball. Not that I'm lonesome without you, I just thought I'd pay a social call. I'd lie and say things are just swell, but to tell the truth, I haven't been too well. And if you should try to kiss me, I promise I won't start. Maybe we'll get back together, starting from this incidental, elemental, simple social call. I thought lots about you, so I thought I'd pay a social call. Do you recall the old days? We used to have a ball. Not that I'm lonesome without you, I just thought I'd pay a social call. I'd lie and say things are just swell, but to tell the truth, I haven't been too well. And if you should try to kiss me, I promise I won't stop. Maybe we'll get back together, starting from this incidental, elemental, simple social call.
You can learn more about Heidi and Daniel at their music at particularrecordings.com. Heidi and Daniel, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks for listening, and happy Valentine's Day. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, pluck our heartstrings and take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 15,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Guest research by Rogue archivist Kelly Policelli. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back soon with another bodice-ripping, straight from the heart, cue the violins, oxytocin-inducing edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
I love you, man.
I love you too. Come here.